She gave me hidden estrogen. Now I live as Charleen. It always felt like pure luck that I managed to fit in with the popular crowd during college. The only reason I got a foot in the door was because one of the top athletes on campus had been my friend back in high school. Through him, I found myself surrounded by jocks, beautiful girls, and parties that seemed straight out of a movie. I even ended up in one of the most talked about fraternities. Those 4 years were wild, and I dreaded the thought of that chapter ending. So I delayed reality a bit. Even after marrying Sharon, I stayed in school, stretching things out by pursuing a PhD. Sharon was incredible. Honestly, the best thing that had ever come into my life. She had striking dark hair, deep expressive eyes, and a figure that turned heads, though she did have a tendency to gain a little weight now and then, something I constantly criticized. The truth? I wasn't exactly impressive myself. I was smaller, not particularly strong, and at 5 feet 7 inches, I was actually shorter than her. Sharon tried to make me feel better about it, avoiding heels, even adjusting her posture, but I still carried this insecurity. Being around confident, dominant guys all the time rubbed off on me. I mimicked their behavior, acting loud, controlling, and overly assertive at home. Looking back, I know I crossed the line more often than not. Most of my friends were still living the single life, and I often behaved as if I was too. Meanwhile, Sharon supported me financially, took care of everything, and asked for very little in return. Still, I'd disappear on spontaneous trips, order her around, and worst of all, mock her appearance. I'd make cruel comments about her body, as if tearing her down somehow made me feel more secure. Deep down, I knew she deserved far better than me, and instead of rising to her level, I tried to bring her down to mine. Everything changed near the end of my studies. I went on a weekend trip with some friends, drank way too much, and ended up cheating with someone I barely even remembered afterward. Word got back to Sharon, and when she confronted me, she was devastated. Seeing her like that should have snapped me into reality, and part of me did feel ashamed, but instead of admitting my mistake, I doubled down. I blamed her. I said horrible things I didn't even truly believe, about her being boring and out of shape, as if that justified what I'd done. It was cruel, defensive nonsense, the kind of talk I'd picked up from locker room bravado. I expected her to leave me after that. Honestly, I thought she should. She had just inherited a large house and a comfortable fortune. She could have walked away and started fresh without any trouble. But she didn't. Instead, she chose to stay and try again. She told me she wanted to improve things, not just for herself, but for us. She suggested we move into her grandmother's house in the countryside and start over. It would be a peaceful place for me to finish my thesis, and she could still manage her work and focus on getting back into shape. I didn't deserve that kind of second chance, but I took it anyway. And she meant every word. At first, her routine was simple, jogging, fitness classes, but before long, it became something much more serious. She committed herself fully, building strength and discipline in a way I hadn't expected. Eventually, she transformed into someone intensely focused, with a home gym, strict diet, and a lifestyle built around fitness. I couldn't deny the results. She looked incredible, and our relationship, at least on the surface, seemed better than ever. But something shifted in me. While she grew stronger and more driven, I found myself going in the opposite direction. I felt tired all the time, unmotivated, stuck behind books and research. Despite eating the same as always, I started gaining weight. Slowly but noticeably, my body softened. It was strange, almost like our roles were quietly reversing without either of us saying a word. And I couldn't quite explain why. It was strange, honestly. I didn't seem to be gaining much weight overall. My belt still fit the same. If anything, I tightened it a notch or two. But at the same time, some of my pants were getting ridiculously tight around the hips and backside. A couple pairs wouldn't even go up anymore. And then there was my chest. I tried to ignore it, but it felt softer than before. Not just out of shape, different. Like there was actual fullness there. I brushed it off as my imagination, maybe just from being inactive. Still, the thought stuck in the back of my mind. Sharon didn't say anything about it. If she noticed, she didn't care. While she was getting stronger and more defined by the day, I seemed to be going in the opposite direction, softer, slower, less motivated. I figured once I finished my thesis, I'd turn things around. Maybe even start lifting with her. What I didn't realize was that none of this was happening by accident. Ever since we moved into that house, Sharon had been quietly setting something in motion. She'd been adding things to my morning routine, mixing substances into my orange juice. She never drank it herself, so it was easy.
But I didn't know any of that at the time.
The months passed, and Sharon's transformation became impossible to ignore. She wasn't losing her femininity, but she had developed a level of strength and muscle that made me a little uncomfortable. I made a few offhand comments early on, but that stopped once she began inviting her fitness friends over. They were intense, confident, powerful, and in some cases, bigger than the guys I used to hang out with. They filled the house with loud energy and laughter, taking over the weight room like it was their domain. I learned quickly to keep my opinions to myself. Sometimes Sharon would joke at my expense. If I teased her about getting too strong, she'd poke at my softer spots and fire back with something like, "Oh, you'd rather I stay soft like you?" And she'd say it right in front of them. I never had a good response. Anything I said would just confirm what she was pointing out. So I'd just laugh it off, even if it left me feeling small. Meanwhile, I was falling apart in quieter ways. I couldn't focus on my thesis anymore. Days blurred together, and I felt stuck, like I was drifting without direction. Sharon seemed to be thriving, building a life full of purpose, friends, and energy. I, on the other hand, had none of that left. Most days, I barely left the couch. I'd sit there for hours, flipping through channels, eating whatever was around. Sometimes I'd find myself watching things I never used to care about, daytime talk shows, shopping channels, even soap operas. Somehow, they pulled me in. The drama, the emotion, it distracted me from how empty I felt. And sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd just break down. That was new for me. I wasn't someone who cried. But lately, it felt like I couldn't help it. I didn't recognize myself anymore, physically or mentally. I felt weak, unmotivated, and completely lost. One evening, Sharon came home and found me sprawled across the couch, completely absorbed in whatever was on TV. She paused, watching me for a moment, then muttered something under her breath. At first, I ignored it, but then I realized she was talking about me. I turned my head slightly. "You've got something to say?" She looked at me calmly. "Yes, Charlie," she said. "I think I do. I work all day and come home to this," she said, looking around with clear frustration. "The least you could do is clean up after yourself. Maybe even help with the laundry or something, considering you're here all day." I stared at her, stunned. "You expect me to do that? I stopped myself too late. That's women's work." Her expression hardened instantly. "It's not women's work. It's just work. And I've got more than enough of it already. Maybe if you got off the couch once in a while, you wouldn't be getting so soft." That was it. I pushed myself up, anger bubbling over, and marched toward her. She still had her heels on, which made her tower over me, but I refused to let that shake me. "Listen," I snapped, raising my hand in warning. "Don't you ever talk to me like that again." What happened next caught me completely off guard. Before I could react, she reached forward and grabbed my chest hard. The pressure was intense, almost shocking, and it forced the air out of me. I froze, unable to move, my whole body locking up as if she'd found some kind of off switch. She leaned in slightly, her voice calm but firm. "You know," she said, "some animals fight when you grab them. Others just stop." I couldn't respond. I couldn't even think straight. Standing that close, I suddenly became aware of how much stronger she was than me, how easily she controlled the situation. It was unsettling in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time, I felt completely overpowered. Still, some stubborn part of me refused to accept it. I pulled back, trying to regain some sense of control. "Fine," I said quickly, grasping at anything. "Let's arm wrestle." She gave me a look, half amusement, half disbelief. "You really don't understand, do you?"
"Fine.
"But if I win, things are going to change around here." I hesitated, but pride wouldn't let me back down. I convinced myself I could win somehow. We sat at the table, hands locked. I tried to position myself just right, focusing everything I had. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. It was over almost instantly. My hand hit the table before I even realized what happened. "Again," I muttered, trying to recover. She sighed, switched arms, and ended it even faster. That was it. Something in me cracked. I dropped my head, frustration and humiliation hitting all at once. I hadn't just lost, I'd been completely outmatched. She softened slightly then, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Listen carefully," she said. "You've always acted like strength is what matters most. Like that's what defines everything." I didn't look up. "Well, right now," she continued, "you're the one who needs to understand something. Things are going to be different from now on." I finally raised my head, confused and uneasy. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about responsibility," she replied. "You're going to start contributing around here, really contributing. That means helping with the house, the chores, everything." I shook my head immediately.
No.
"I'm not doing that." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached across the table, grabbed my wrists effortlessly, and pulled me forward, making it clear how little resistance I could offer. "You don't really have much leverage here," she said quietly. "Think about it." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come out the way I wanted. The situation had shifted, and I could feel it. She let go and stepped back. "This isn't a discussion," she added. "Things are changing, and you're going to start pulling your weight." I stood there, unsure of what to say, realizing for the first time that I wasn't in control anymore. And that maybe I never really had been. "And if I come home and you're not looking presentable," she added coldly, "there will be consequences. And don't expect anything between us until you can prove yourself again." I shook my head in disbelief. "This is insane. You've completely lost it." She didn't flinch. "Not nearly as much as you did when you cheated and blamed me for it." Her words hit harder than I expected. "Well," she continued, her tone sharp, "now you're the one sitting around all day, doing nothing. So you'd better start making yourself useful, and maybe even pleasant to be around." Before I could react, she smacked me lightly on the backside. The humiliation of it stung more than the impact itself, and I felt tears welling up again. "Go get changed," she said firmly, "and start dinner." I steadied myself, forcing some authority back into my voice.
No.
"I'm not doing that. I'm definitely not putting on anything like that." She looked at me, unimpressed. "Then I'll do it for you." Before I could move, she lifted me with surprising ease and dropped me onto the bed. In moments, she had stripped away my clothes and replaced them with things I didn't recognize myself in. Piece by piece, she dressed me, adjusting everything until she seemed satisfied. Then she guided me in front of a mirror. I tried to pull away, but she held me steady until I stopped struggling. Slowly, she stepped back, letting me see my reflection clearly. For a moment, I didn't know what to think. Everything felt unfamiliar. Yet oddly, the clothes seemed to fit better than anything I'd worn in a long time. I hated to admit it, even to myself, but there was a strange comfort in it. I pushed the thought away immediately. No matter what, I wasn't going to accept this. Running away crossed my mind, but reality stopped me. I had nowhere to go. No income, no real plan. And despite everything, I didn't want to leave her. I just wanted things to go back to how they were, where I felt in control. The first couple of weeks were rough. Every time I pushed back or refused to cooperate, things escalated. Eventually, I started thinking that maybe going along with it just a little might make her lose interest. So I began doing small things. Getting dressed on my own. Tidying up here and there. Preparing simple meals. She noticed. At first, she seemed pleased, even complimentary. But it was never enough. There was always something missing, something not done right. And each time, I'd end up paying for it again. It became clear that the only way out was to somehow regain my strength. If I could just beat her once, maybe everything would stop. She even let me use the weight room when she wasn't home. I tried, but it was no use. Even the lighter weights felt heavy. Meanwhile, she only seemed to grow stronger. Every now and then, I'd challenge her again, hoping things might have changed. They hadn't. Each time ended the same way, quickly, effortlessly, with her barely trying.
Eventually, I stopped asking.
Something in me started to fade. The constant resistance, the frustration, it wore me down. I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. So one day, I decided to go all in. I made an effort, really made an effort. I prepared everything, took care of the house, and did everything I thought she expected. When she came home, she noticed immediately. Her reaction was warm, approving. For the first time in a long while, I felt good, like I'd done something right. I smiled, hopeful. So, things can go back to normal now?
She paused.
Then shook her head. No, she said simply. The answer hit harder than anything before. She explained, calmly but firmly, that this wasn't temporary. That if things were going to change, they had to change completely, not halfway, not just for show. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I could see she was serious. She told me that if I wanted things to work between us, I'd have to trust her. That she was doing this for both of us. I didn't know what to think anymore. Part of me wanted to refuse, to walk away, to hold on to whatever pride I had left. But another part of me, tired, uncertain, afraid of losing everything, hesitated. After a long silence, I finally spoke. All right, I said quietly. I'll try. She nodded, as if she'd been expecting that answer all along. Good, she said. Then we'll start with something simple. I looked at her, unsure. You need to learn to listen, she continued. Really listen. Not just hear words, but understand tone, expression, everything. I frowned slightly, confused. So from now on, she said, when I tell you to practice, you'll repeat what you hear properly, not half-heartedly. You'll get it right. I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to, but I nodded anyway, because at that point, I wasn't sure what else I could do. Do you understand? She asked. Yes, I replied quietly. Good, she said, a small, satisfied smile forming. She adjusted herself, straightening up, smoothing her dress, lightly fixing her hair, then added in a calm, almost cheerful tone, It's been a long day. I think I'll relax with a bath, put on something nice, and turn in early. The shift in her mood caught me completely off guard. Then suddenly, practice, Charleen. My heart dropped. A test. Out of nowhere. I panicked. My mind went blank. I couldn't recall exactly what she had said or done, just fragments. Something about relaxing, maybe food? I froze. She sighed, clearly unimpressed, and gave me a light smack as a reminder. Then she calmly repeated everything, from the way she stood to the exact words she spoke. Practice, Charleen. This time I tried. I mimicked her movements, awkwardly at first, standing up, adjusting myself, smoothing my clothes, and repeating her words as best I could. Not good enough. Again, she said firmly. You're copying, but you're not feeling it. I want the tone, the expression, the intention. It has to come from you, not just from memory. It took a few attempts, but eventually something clicked. When I got it right, it didn't feel like imitation anymore. It felt natural, as if the thoughts were my own. That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, this practice became part of everyday life. Sometimes it was almost playful, like when we were watching a movie and she suddenly told me to recreate a scene. We'd even laugh together on occasion. Other times, it was painfully uncomfortable, especially when she had me do it in front of others. One afternoon, her friend Tanya came over, excited to show off her freshly styled hair. Another friend, Miranda, admired it enthusiastically, complimenting every detail while lightly fussing over it. Before I could even process the moment. Practice, Charleen. To my surprise, I didn't hesitate this time. I stepped forward, repeated the words, mirrored the tone, the gestures, everything. And for the first time, it came easily, naturally. Because the truth was, I had already been thinking the same thing. By then, something in me had shifted. I had stopped resisting. I threw myself into it completely, learning, observing, adapting. My days became filled with small details I had never paid attention to before. I began to notice things, how people spoke, how they carried themselves, the subtle expressions behind words. I started taking pride in things I once ignored, keeping the house in order, learning new skills, experimenting with routines. There was a strange satisfaction in doing things well, in getting them right. Each day, I found myself trying harder, waiting for her to come home, wanting her to notice the effort I'd made, wanting her approval. And when she did notice, it felt rewarding. We got along better than we ever had before. Conversations flowed more easily. There was less tension, more understanding. Strangely, I felt more like myself than I had in a long time, though sometimes she would remind me just how far things had changed. On occasion, after I reacted too strongly or slipped back into old habits, she would stop me with a simple, "Practice, Charleen." And I'd realize in that moment that I had become something I once would have never imagined, something she now expected me to embody completely. Whenever she said it, I would smile shyly, half embarrassed, half proud. It meant I'd done something right. But one night, everything shifted again. As we were heading off to our rooms, she paused in the doorway and looked at me thoughtfully. "Going straight to sleep?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied softly. "I want to fix my hair first, maybe do a bit of crocheting." She smiled warmly. "Charleen, you've really changed. You've become so gentle, so dedicated. I'm proud of you." I felt my cheeks warm. "Thank you. That means a lot." She tilted her head slightly. "I think it's time." "For what?" I asked, confused. "For a reward." I blinked. "A reward?" "Yes," she said calmly. "You've come so far that tonight, I'm going to let things be like they used to be. Just for one night." I didn't fully understand at first, but the meaning slowly sank in. It had been so long that the past felt distant, almost unreal. Still, the idea stirred something hopeful in me, and I followed her into her room. She lay back and gestured for me to join her. There was something different this time. As we drew close, I felt more aware, more connected to her than ever before. I wasn't rushed or distracted. I noticed everything: her expressions, her breathing, the way she responded to the smallest touch. It wasn't like before. I wasn't driven by urgency, but by a quiet desire to be close to her, to understand her, to make her feel cared for. And yet, something was missing. I hesitated, suddenly unsure. I realized how long it had been since I'd felt the same impulses I once took for granted. Before I could say anything, she gently reassured me. "It's all right," she said softly. "You don't need to be who you were before." Her words eased something in me. That night felt less like returning to the past, and more like discovering something new, something deeper, more emotional than anything we'd shared before. The next day, things felt almost normal. Miranda and Tanya stopped by, as they often did, planning to use the weight room before relaxing with tea. I served them and joined them afterward, settling into conversation. "So," Miranda said with a knowing smile, "I hear you've fully settled into your new role." I smiled back, a little shy but sincere. "I think I have. I've never felt more at peace, honestly." "That's lovely," she replied. "You really do carry yourself beautifully." "Thank you," I said. "I try my best." Tanya leaned forward slightly. "Ever thought about joining us for workout? It's a great way to stay in shape." I shook my head with a small laugh. "I don't think that's for me. You all look amazing, but I prefer something a little softer, I guess." They exchanged amused glances. "I like being this way," I added quietly. "And she seems to like it too." There was a brief pause, then warm smiles all around. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I felt like I belonged.